Red Letter broadcast coming right up with Mel Lewis, who is our guest of an ongoing series of the history of jazz drums. That's on the Musician Show tonight. Start the show with Mel Lewis and his quintet and John's Abbey. And that was the Mel Lewis Quintet with John Zabby, a Bud Powell original, recorded on their Gatemouth LP, the Mel Lewis Quintet Mellifluous. Mark Johnson on bass, Jim McNeely piano, of course Mel on the drums, and John Mosca trombone, and Dick Oates on the soprano saxophone on that particular title. It's 6 minutes after 6. Lauren Schoenberg with you. It's my pleasure to welcome back the one and only Mel Lewis. Welcome back.
Yeah, it's good to be back. It's it's funny. I ran into an awful lot of people said they heard the show last week because we had no feedback last week because of the telephones not working.
Well, first of all, the phones are working again, so we can give out the number. It's a new number. It has the first 3 new numbers. It used to be, well, I won't even say the old number. What it is now, it's 854-5223 is the phone number at the station. Yes, I ran into a lot of people, including Connie Kay I mentioned to you. I saw last night.
Yeah.
The MJQ was down at the Blue Note. And he said, "Oh, I enjoyed the show."
I had a lot of people call me at home afterwards, friends, And I'm glad. I'm glad that that they liked it,
Yeah. I'm glad they liked it too, and I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity to plow right ahead. Let's get right back into it because we're already so far behind, which is I'm happy that we're behind because it means that we're going to stretch this out way past 3 shows. I can tell you that we have this Wednesday and next Wednesday scheduled with Mel from 6 to 9, and we'll get as far as we get. And at that point, we'll announce when we'll continue. Probably be, depending on Mel's schedule and my schedule, probably be Tuesdays in February and March, and that time we'll come back.
We'll get it done.
Yeah, but we're going to plow right ahead and get right back into it. In case you don't know what we're talking about, back in 1982-83, Mel Lewis did a series of broadcasts here on KCR on the history of jazz drums that created quite a stir and became quite popular. And I foolishly, of course, many drummers wanted copies of the tapes, and I think I gave out my originals, and I don't remember. I never found them. So the point was, I was regretting the fact that all the great wisdom Mel gave out on the history of jazz drums was pretty much gone. So decided, let's either rebroadcast what I have and do a new part of what I was missing, or just do the whole thing again. So Mel was game, and we're doing the whole thing again, better and different.
Yeah, that's all. We just new ideas.
Yeah, different selection of material.
Yeah.
It's not exactly the same things we heard the first time around.
No, in fact, there's some better material.
Yeah,
actually.
Last week we heard Baby Dodd, Zooty Singleton, Kaiser Marshall, Stan King, a little bit of Chick Webb towards the end.
Right.
I'm probably omitting a person or two, I can't remember. But the point was that we ended with Chick Webb, and we were kind of rushed to get out of the studio. So I'd like to play a few more Chick Webb recordings so we can talk about Chick once again. So let's get right back into it. The history of jazz drums, once again, featuring the one and only Mel Lewis. And right now we're going to hear Chick Webb and one of his most famous recordings. We'll hear Clap Hands, Here Comes Charlie. And, I'm going to sneeze. I didn't sneeze. And then Clap Hands, Here Comes Charlie. And then Liza. Chick Webb, 1938. 3738. Chick Webb, 3 recordings. We began with Clap Hands, Here Comes Charlie. Then we heard of the Little Chicks, one of the small groups.
Yeah.
Small group out of the band. Wayman Carver on the flute, Chauncey Horton on the clarinet and the rhythm section, and a little Spanish Town. And then we heard the big band with the famous Liza, Benny Carter arrangement, late 1930s. Well, he died in 1939, so it must have been about 37 or 38. Unfortunately, I don't have the recording date right in front of me.
Well, see now this shows what Chick Webb was all about. We heard, I mean, at this time, what was happening was here's a man who brought drumming to the forefront. You know, I mean, not just the fact that he was the leader of the band. You know, because being the leader of the band doesn't mean you necessarily have to be the loudest person in the band and so on and be so forthright with. So what he did is he brought what is probably the beginning of what you would call solo drumming. I don't know if I mentioned this last week, but he brought the drums. All of a sudden became more important than they had ever been before. Of course, a lot of people couldn't do what he did. Also, you had a lot of leaders wouldn't allow you to, which was basically the problem anyway. There's probably a lot of drummers who might have had the knowledge or the guts even, you know, to do it, except they'd be fired, you know, because that was the routine. The drums up to this point, including recording everything, was keep it cool, you know, keep it quiet, keep time, and that was it. And Chick, now what he did is he brought solo drumming into the timekeeping patterns. He brought in more, not fills. He was actually playing very aggressive. He brought aggressiveness into the drumming, you know, where instead of just laying back and being cool, which is another art, you know, that's something a lot of drummers could learn to do. He brought the opposite, which is what everybody had to do then in those days, was keep it cool. Now all of a sudden he brought this aggressiveness in. He made the drums shine. But of course he had to be careful now of not getting in the way. I'll be honest, I heard times when he was in the way. You know, it's not perfect, you know, but it was experimental.
Yeah, it was brand new.
That's it. You know, it was experimental and it was real. You know, I mean, and it's the way he felt, and probably each time he played it, he probably heard a little more here, a little less there. You know, he did this a little more the next time. I mean, these are just single performances.
That's right. That
we're lucky to even have on tape or wax or whatever.
Yeah.
So we don't even know about all the other wonderful nights there were of performance.
Oh, that's true.
were not captured, but somebody heard them, you know, and but this is what's happening now. And this is now the beginning of an era that starts what is continued later on with Gene Krupa. And Gene was lucky he had the opportunity to do it in Goodman's band, and that Benny even allowed him to do that.
Yeah.
And it might have even come out of the fact that, now I'm not positive, did they play opposite Chick's band?
Very early on.
Long before 38 Carnegie Hall.
Yes, it's a little known fact, but they did.
See?
Actually.
Now Benny was probably impressed by that whole thing, you know, where and his way of how, after being blown out by the Chick Webb band, his whole thought is, how can we get even? And that means I got to let Gene play more aggressive. We got to do something like that. This is what knocked and that's the truth, because I could see why everybody was knocked out with the Chick Webb band at the Savoy Ballroom. Is that aggressive drumming?
Yeah.
You know, everybody likes loud drums for some reason or other, you know, except musicians, of course, and depends on the music. But it knocked the people out, and it gave the band a drive that nobody else was doing, you know. So naturally, Chick was really knocking everybody's bands, you know, and that was always a double bandstand there, you know. And
right.
Anybody that played opposite him, and he had the house band, was getting wiped out by him. It was actually him doing it. And so what was the secret was more aggressive drumming.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it depended on your book, too. But the Fletcher Henderson book was made to order for that. You know,
yeah.
Actually, it's just a matter of Gene being allowed to do it.
Yeah.
And I think Benny opened up on him and let him do it.
It's funny you mentioned that because Gene joined Benny in a very early 35. And when they talk about the Goodman Band and the Chick Webb Band, they usually refer to the battle of the bands that they had later on with Harry James and when that band, 37, 38. But it's a little known fact that in 1935, Goodman and Webb did a series of one-nighters with each other at the Savoy Ballroom, not in the battle, but just at that point, just alternating.
Yeah.
And that's probably when Chick made such a distinct impression on Gene, because the next drummer we're going to go to is Gene Krupa, and you'll hear a difference before he heard probably Chick and some of the other greats, But not that he didn't bring a lot of his own stuff to it. He seemed really to focus in on the snare drum work. When he does solo work, it seems to be
There's I hear, but you also hear some Baby Dodds in there. I mean,
Yes.
you'll hear some Chick Webb influences too, and I hear Dodds more than anybody.
We're talking about Chick Webb.
Chick Webb,
Right.
And
Behind the piano solo, he was still
yeah,
doing
he
that.
went
The
he went to that
rims.
he went to that little to the rims, which to me again was the old tap dance routine,
Yeah.
And I used to do that too. I did it when I was a kid.
Yeah?
Oh, sure. Many a time when I played behind the piano, I played on the rim of the bass drum. That was because that's what I saw my father do. That's what I saw other people do. And depending on who you were working with, I played with these. When I was a very young kid, I played with some old timers. I mean, they were old timers to me.
So this would have been in the late 30s.
Yeah.
And so if they were old timers, that meant that they were by that time.
My pre-bebop days, I was not. I was playing on rims, and I mean, we did the same thing.
Yeah.
The only thing I sort of hated was a cowbell.
Mm-hmm.
I had one, but I rarely used it.
Mhm.
I hated it. To me, a cowbell belonged on a cow. I really had a thing about cowbells. I don't know why I did,
Yeah.
but I thought a cowbell was corny. But I wasn't against rims.
Mm-hmm.
I thought a wood block was corny, but I didn't think rims were.
Yeah.
I still don't. I
It
still
was-
think rims are cool.
It was funny you mentioned something last week about Ben Pollock playing on the bass drum with the hand.
Oh
or
yeah,
something
with
like
the
that.
hand, sure.
In the course of
Oh,
between this
yeah.
week and last week, I read Mel Torme has a new book out with your pictures in, by the way, and along with Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich,
yeah.
and I mean together in the same picture playing,
Oh.
and he talks about he was in
Oh, I'm in the
Me-
back up there. Yeah.
Mel Torme was in Chico Marx's band, and the straw boss of Chico Marx's band was Ben Pollock. And oddly enough, he talked about the same thing you did about when he says they went to sit in a jam session one night and there was a showy drummer. And Ben Pollock went up and sat in and didn't do the showy stuff, but kind of played the bass drum with a brush and did all kinds of odd,
Yeah.
he was a musician's drummer.
Yeah.
And that was nice to hear.
No, that was true. But I had seen Gene use the stick on the bass drum
Really?
during soloing and filling in. I saw Buddy do it. Buddy did it.
Buddy
many-
did it, too?
Oh yes, sure. I
Oh.
saw them all do that. And my father did it.
Yeah.
So I did it. See,
Now, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
no, go ahead. You didn't interrupt.
What I was going to say was that now one thing that I shouldn't say I find lacking in Chick Webb, because that's silly to judge Chick Webb by what happened later, but the one thing about him is he doesn't seem to be a part of the rhythm section in a way that later on, as we'll hear in this show when we get to Joe Jones and that kind of drum, and even Krupa to a certain degree, kind of sublimated themselves inside the rhythm section and made the rhythm section one thing. What I hear on the Chick Webb records really is drums as a separate entity.
Well, that's it. I think that's what it was. I think I think Chick, like I said, all of a sudden we have a very aggressive drummer, and I think that's what he became. I mean, where he was the section leader. There was no you guys are behind me.
Right.
I am the leader.
Right.
And I'm gonna do it this way. I'm gonna be so strong. You couldn't hear. There was no way of hearing the bass in those days anyway. And the heavier he was with his foot, and he was strong there, so he carried the whole ball. So I mean, there was nothing the bass player really could do except slap away and try and keep up with him.
Right. And he did have a great bass player who's still working in town
Right.
with Bobby Short, Beverly
But,
Peer.
yeah, and the guitar didn't mean anything,
Right.
And the piano players were playing oompa in those days. So I mean, basically, Chick just it was a one-man rhythm section, and a very strong one.
Yeah.
Later on, it became I think because of the bassy rhythm section, everybody became more aware of what four guys have to do.
It was funny that one point when we were listening to I guess it was Liza, where the band went ba 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 ba
Yeah,
ba, and he kind of made it with him
He was playing a solo against it, and then caught the figure with them
on
at
the
same
snare
time.
drum.
Right.
And it was funny. It was kind of a very elementary, early making the hits with the band.
Right.
It didn't come off in a sense of
No.
it didn't really work on the snare. It
And
would have
on the
been
repeat, but on the repeat, he did it differently. He did it in
Yeah.
a more musical fashion the second time.
yeah,
He played the figure again, but he didn't play it with the rims. He didn't play it with the rim
Right.
shot. So,
right,
in other words, the band was out in front instead of him.
Right.
He was more where I would put it.
right.
I think it's better the second time.
Yes,
Also, this tempo on Liza was much better than that transcription we heard
yeah,
because
with Roy Eldridge.
that was way too fast. You know,
Yeah.
I think the whole band was struggling.
That's Mel Lewis was referring to last week when we played an air check of Roy Eldridge and Chick Webb as guests with the Saturday Night Swing Band, directed by Leith Stevens, on a radio broadcast where they did Liza, very fast
Way
and
too fast.
crazy.
Yeah.
This was a nice tempo.
It was great. It
Yeah.
swung much better. Yeah, slower a lot of times is a lot better than faster, you know.
Yeah,
Faster becomes an endurance contest sometimes. And not only that, you could hear better what he was doing. You could hear how clean he played, you know. And you could also hear his, how he played the hi-hat and how he went to the press rolls. And you also noticed that Chick changed sounds up behind every soloist.
mm-hmm.
He played a different sound.
Yeah,
You know, and that's very important. So I mean, everything he did was fresh.
yeah,
You know, so I like the fact. But again, I'll say is that what he brought to drumming at that point is why the drummers today who overdo it, quite a few young guys have a tendency because to play way too loud and too aggressive in small groups especially. They have a tendency to play too much because they're so worried they're not going to get hurt or something like that, you know. Also, they're not listening, because if you're really listening, you can't be playing that loud and listening. It's impossible to play that loud and listen, too, because you can't hear anything but yourself if you're playing that loud. So that means if you think you're listening, you're certainly fooling yourself. But I'll tell you, the people sitting out in front listening are hearing what you're not doing right. See, now, Chick, if you don't have big band experience, that's where you're lacking. Because big band experience is where you learn to play an arrangement, and you learn what's in that arrangement. So you also learn when and where and how to stay out of the way, and when you got a chance to do something, and especially if you want to play aggressive. You know, but you still got to know what's going on, and that means listening. You know, it's not a matter of reading; it's a matter of hearing. And a guy like Chick Webb had that hearing ability.
yeah. I think the story about him, I've heard a story. It's similar to one they tell about Buddy Rich, where both of them were not great readers, or even
But
readers.
they listen.
But supposedly Chick and Buddy would have someone run the band would run the chart down with
Yeah.
either someone else playing or them not playing. They'd be out front listening. Hear the band play it down once, and that was it.
And go right in there and do it. You
Yeah.
know.
Which actually, you know what, might be a better way to do it than to. You know something? I've played in bands. Maybe you can answer that. I'm sure you've done. I've played in bands where guys are playing a chart they've played literally 1,000 times. And sometimes you'll see the drummer, he's still reading the chart.
Yeah, I
He's
mean,
played
there's
it
no reason for
1,000
it.
times.
There's no reason for
never
that, you know.
understand that. As long
You
as I
know,
live.
to me, the only
know?
reason for being a good reader is when you have one time to play an arrangement in a studio
in the
situation.
studios, right?
That's where it came in very important for me. Or if you were playing a show where you have
Oh,
so
yeah.
many things to catch,
Sure.
you know, where all the dance routines and
Sure.
things like that. That's where reading is very important. You
Yeah.
know, especially if you're not in a situation where you can see.
Right, right.
See, in the old days, you always, a band was on a stage, and if it was a dance team or a comedy team or where you had to catch things, the act was usually right in front of you. You know, I mean, you were there,
Right.
and you opened up your eye and you watched. But in television and in these situations where they stick the band off in another room and all that, everything sort of has to be written in. And so that's where reading ability would be quite important.
Sure. But I meant in terms of just a normal dance band or
Yeah,
something playing
no,
a chart
in
that's been
terms
played
of a
100
dance band
times.
show, man, you should have it down after one or two times through. You should know it.
Yeah.
And you could hear how well Chick really knew everything he played. He knew it.
Yeah.
He knew it inside out. But what I was getting back to is that today's young drummer, you owe Chick Webb. Because if it wasn't for Chick's aggressiveness, I think that even by now we might not have been able to All right, maybe somebody else would have done it, but eventually.
Gene. Or
But you got to realize that the next most famous rhythm section, the next most famous sound was the bassy thing, which was cool, not aggressive. It was intense, but cool. You know,
Yeah.
intensity was there, a strong intensity, but with another approach, not volume.
Yeah. Well, we're going to hear that later on in the show. We're going to get to Joe Jones in the bassy rhythm section. Talking with Mel Lewis here. You're tuned into WKCR FM in New York, 89.9 on your FM dial. It's 6:33, and this is the History of the Drums, Part 2, Topsy Part 2. We're doing it here on the Musicians Show. We were here last week, and we'll be here next Wednesday, and then we'll continue after that, and we'll let you know when those broadcasts will be, because there's no way we're going to finish by next Wednesday, and I'm very happy about that. Well, we just heard Chick Webb. Another facet. You mentioned the hi-hats. He
Yeah.
was before Joe Jones, one of the first ones on records to champion the hi-hat. Of course, in a totally different way than Joe did it. He seemed to be like a very big kind of one kind of attack on the hi-hat thing, but it's a big. That they just seem so big when he plays it. It's so majestic the way he does it. You
Well,
know.
the cymbals were very small, and he had to get the biggest sound he could get out of them, and he did.
Yeah.
You know, he knew exactly how much he wanted.
And again, one final thing that's really beside the point musically, but that might inform some of you about Chick Webb. If you don't know anything about him, he was a gentleman who didn't make it past his very early 30s, and who was what they call a dwarf. He was very.
He was very small.
He was bent over and
Yeah.
all that, and very small. I mean, 3 or 4 feet tall. So it's all the more amazing that he did what he did. Of course, he had a drum set specially built for him, I guess, with a so he could reach the bass
I'm sure.
drum.
Yeah, I never, I never saw him in person, so I was too young, and I was in Buffalo. The band came through Buffalo, but when they ever, it's funny. I'm trying to remember whether I saw him or not. It's possible I did.
Sure.
I just don't remember.
Yeah. But
I
certainly
remember,
you saw.
well, I
that
remember
too.
the band
Right.
coming through, and I remember through Buffalo.
Right.
But Ella was there.
Hmm.
Now, was she there with him, or
Yes, yeah.
did she front the band?
No, she was the singer with the band while he was alive. Then after he was gone, she took the band over.
Then I saw him.
Oh, then you did.
Then I did see him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, she was there from 1934 on.
See, and the only reason I probably did, it was because it would have only been once,
Right.
but I must have seen him.
Yeah.
But I mean, I knew him from the time, and from the broadcasts,
Sure.
and from the records, which were popular then, and from her
Right.
with the hit and all that.
Right.
And I remember the band coming through Buffalo with Ella Fitzgerald.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I wasn't sure was whether it came through under the direction of Ella Fitzgerald or whether it was him, because it said the Chick Webb Orchestra, and there was that picture of him with
Right.
and it's just there's certain things I remember and certain things I don't remember.
Did Gene and Buddy talk about Chick Webb to you?
Oh, sure, yeah. But they talked about the same things we're talking about
No,
now.
yeah.
And I think just about everything they ever said was put in print anyway. About Chick. To me, they were both definitely out of him anyway.
Yeah.
I'd say Gene first, Buddy second. But I mean, you definitely hear Chick Webb in both their playing.
Well, that leads us right into the next chapter here, as we talk about Gene Krupa. Who did assert himself as a drummer, as an important drummer, and make a lot of great recordings before he heard Chick Webb.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
When he was from Chicago, Krupa was from Chicago, and then was mainly influenced by Zooty Singleton and Baby Dodds, I guess, and people like that in his
Yeah.
early years. And of course, with a strong dash. I think it's important to say that just because you say someone's influenced by someone.
Dave Tuff, I think,
Yeah.
was around before Gene, and
Yes,
and,
he was.
and definitely had an influence on Gene too.
Yes. Gene. I think Gene took his place
Yeah.
as kids, in
Right.
that band out there that they talk about. Dave Tuff is a drummer we're going to get to on the next show, and we're going to talk about him. Although actually he would fit in right here chronologically, but for a number of reasons we're going to save him for part 3. Well, we're going to turn to Gene Krupa right now. We're going to listen to a recording session that Mel alluded to last week, and that has been made famous through the printed word, and also there's a scene in the Gene Krupa story, probably one of the few truthful scenes in that film. Of course, Mel Lewis is on the soundtrack for that film, in case you didn't know that.
I did quite a bit of it.
But it's true that when the Mackenzie and Condon Chicagoans, these young kids who were playing this music around Chicago, Jimmy McPartland and Frank Teschmacher and Bud Freeman and the rest, Eddie Condon, Jim Lanigan, and Joe Sullivan, and Krupa went into the studios for the first time in late 1927, that the recording engineer, told Gene he couldn't use his bass drum and use the drum kit, and Krupa insisted and did and prevailed. And although they still buried him in the back of the studio somewhere, the point was he had the drum set there, and at different points you can kind of tell that there's a bass drum there. That was very important because it was the next year, 1928, at the same studios, OK Studios in Chicago, that Zooty Singleton and a lot of other drummers began to record with a full drum set. In fact, last week we listened to the St. James and Foimery, and you could hear the brushes and the bass drum.
Right.
And Krupa really insisted, and then we owe him a thanks for that. Now, he was a very young man on this recording we're about to hear, which is Nobody's Sweetheart. Or no, I think it's China Boy. Well, we'll hear when we hear it. I always get those two tunes confused. And this is Gene Krupa as a teenager in Chicago with the Austin High Gang, and you'll hear some very early Gene Krupa. Let's focus in on the drums on this one, 1927.
Well, see that the bass drum was there.
Yeah.
I heard it. I heard it all through, but I also heard a lot of interference by a slap bass. The slapping bass was constantly getting in the way of what Gene was doing on top, and that banjo was another pain.
Yeah.
And see, those are the engineers' faults even in those days. It's the same crap that goes on today with too much bass or too much. During the commercial days, I remember when I was doing studio work, there would be too much guitar. On ching, 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 ching. They always get too much on the guitar, and you'd never hear the nice subtle things the drums were doing,
Yeah.
and I used to get pretty drug about that. Because why? I mean, what for? Because they had this misconception about things.
Yeah.
You know. Then they got into this when electric bass came in. Then all of a sudden, where you always got a nice clean sound on an upright on a real acoustic bass, all of a sudden the bass is over-recorded. You know.
You hear him sliding
Yeah,
around.
everybody's doing. Yeah, I mean, it really got ridiculous after a while.
Yeah.
And but what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
You know.
Tell me about what you heard about when you mentioned that you could hear Gene on that record play behind.
Gene was playing. The only time I could really hear what he was actually doing with his hands is he was playing on the rim of the bass drum during the piano solo.
Yeah. How could you
Yeah.
tell it was the bass drum?
Because of the because of the lower pitch sound, and he was playing 4/4. He played 4/4 on that bass drum all the way through the whole track. I was able to pick that up all the way, but I could hear very little of what he was doing on top
Yeah.
until at the very end when he went to that little tom tom, which was probably one of those little Chinese tom toms.
You mean on the afterbeat
On
there,
the
on the last
afterbeat.
eight?
Yeah, on the last eight. That's about the only time we got to hear what he was really doing up there.
Yeah.
And I know he was probably doing some snare drum press roll, but we just couldn't hear it.
Yeah.
But that's not his fault. They had him. You could. He was definitely off in a corner somewhere.
Yeah. Again, that's the famous Mackenzie and Condon Chicagoans OK record from 1927
And of course, Condon was there with the banjo or the.
Yeah.
So whatever.
Wasn't exactly in tune that day. He
Not
played
too-
some nice things sometimes, but
Yeah.
not that particular day. Great work, Frank Teschmacher, Bud Freeman, who's still wailing out in Chicago, and Jimmy McParland, who also was still very active, playing on that recording. Famous recording for Gene Krupa, again, the one where he insisted on using a bass drum, and for the first time that we can document on a jazz record session, the bass drum was present. And it was a little victory that was to mean a lot later.
Definitely.
Now, Krupa played in Mal Hallett's band, I know, and
Right,
Buddy
out of
Rogers'
Boston,
band.
Yeah.
And eventually, through well, actually, he was associated with Benny Goodman long before he played in his big band. I think they recorded with Red Nichols together around
Right.
1929, 1930, and then in New York they were both in the first call jazz studio guys,
Yeah.
1930, 31, 32. And I believe they first played together in a big band. Benny had put together a band for Russ Colombo, and I know they played together there. And then Gene went out with Buddy Rogers' band, and the
Yeah.
story goes that now Goodman, the first drummer, the two drummers in the early Goodman band, one guy named was Sammy Weiss.
I remember Sammy. I knew Sammy.
Yeah, you knew?
Sure. Sammy was a vaudeville drummer, really. He worked with people like Jimmy Durante and Eddie Cantor. You know, he traveled with those kind of people, and I knew him out on the coast. He was a studio man, you know.
And the other drummer was Stan King, who we heard on
Yeah.
last week's show.
Yeah.
And supposedly Krupa was. I'm sorry, were we going to say something about Sammy Weiss?
Well, I mean, Sammy was.
But did he swing? I mean, was he interested in swinging or just good
I wouldn't
time?
call him a swinging drummer, no. You know, but he was a good old he was a vaudeville drummer to me. I mean, that's what
What's
I
a
heard.
vaudeville drummer?
Somebody who plays shows all the time. You know, I mean,
Right.
that really can play shows. He was that kind of, that plays acts
Right.
and takes over that kind of a situation. You know,
Right.
can catch everything. Works good with dancers and with comedians and all that. You know,
Yeah.
that's where Sammy Weiss's main thing was. Yeah, in fact, I think his sons are still active out there as sort of doing the same things that he did, in his time.
The story goes that he was with Goodman's band, and then Stan King, and I think
Tapes we're talking about, folks, have to be turned over once in a while.
Krupa was in Buddy Rogers' band. Buddy Rogers was a movie actor, and I think he played like 13 instruments. And supposedly Hammond was saying, "Come on, you got to come to New York. Goodman has this great band. They're playing some swing arrangements." And Krupa said, "Forget it. I'm not. No more jazz. I want to make a living and all that kind of stuff." And then supposedly Buddy Rogers picked up the trombone or something like that, and Krupa said, "Okay, I'll meet you there next week." And he joined Benny Goodman, and it turned out to be a very fortuitous event because it was through that association, as everyone knows, that Sing 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 and all that stuff really happened.
Well, you see, yeah, that could have been, Gene. Gene was a very, out of all the drummers of those days, Gene was a very handsome young guy.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people didn't even know he was Polish, because you usually associate Polish with blonde hair, blue eyes, and
Yeah.
so on, And here's this guy with black hair. He had black hair and dark eyes, and he looked Italian. He had that Latin look,
Yeah.
And the chicks went nuts for him, and he had a class about him, I mean, I knew that since I was a kid, but when I first met him, when I became his little pal, there was something about him, about the way he carried himself, you know, that, and there were Hollywood beckoned, you know. The same with Buddy, you know, this star thing, you know. And so I could see how easily we could have lost him if it wasn't that he had such musical sense. And like everybody else that loves music more than the other scene, you find out that Hollywood was a dumb scene, you know. It always was, it still is, you know. I mean, it really is not a great place to be, you know. I mean, if you want to really be involved in music, you know, real music. Although, I mean, there were some fantastic musicians out there working in the studio orchestras, but that isn't where they wanted Gene.
Right.
And it wasn't a matter of being in a big pit orchestra. I mean, when you listen to some of the music that's been, and when you hear these old films, when you see the old films and you hear what's going on in the background, there's some musicianship there, you know. And there's some heavy drumming by some excellent drummers, you know. That's what vaudeville drumming I'm talking about. I mean, some of that kind of drumming. Those guys catching all those Busby Berkeley stuff and all that. I mean, that's some, you got to read, you know, and you got to play. And you get one shot at those things. They no time for extra rehearsals. That called for another kind of person, you know. And that wasn't for a guy like Gene Krupa. So I could see where it wouldn't take much to get him to scare him out of there and get him back to New York where the playing was.
Yeah, it's one thing about him. When people say Gene Krupa, you think of Gene Krupa. Well, first of all, first thing that comes to mind for many people, even people from younger generations, is the very stupid, I have to say, and bum rap he got with the whole drug thing and all that. And it's I think it's worth mentioning just quickly, just to dispel that rumor about Gene Krupa, drug fiend, and all that stuff.
That was a total setup.
It was a framing.
Oh, yeah. I knew that.
I know that you knew it, but I bet you most people
don't. No, of course not, because once they, you know, our wonderful press, like as always, even today, once they hit with something on page 1, and then when you're proven not guilty and everything is they're wrong, that's on page 40. You know?
If you're lucky.
Yeah.
Basically, Krupa was set up with that whole marijuana thing and the whole drug thing, and you know, he probably, like a lot of other musicians,
he wouldn't go along with you know, there was some big time agencies,
booking agencies
running everything, and Gene, you know, I know other musicians who were wiped out of the business.
Yeah.
Because they refused to go along with this gangsterism.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
You'll be with us or else routine, and Gene didn't want to do that, so they said, all right, we'll fix you.
Yeah.
The funny bit is, it hurt him. It did hurt him because it gave him the reputation of being a dope addict.
Yeah, and it was a
when
lovely...
I mean, I mean, that just wasn't true, you know.
What was he like as a person?
Oh, he was a sweetheart, man. He was one of that. Which is probably one of the reasons he wasn't as successful a band leader as people like Goodman and Dorsey and them, because he was a nice guy. The guys loved him. He was fun to work with, and he treated everybody nice. I saw him in action too. I mean, and you talk to guys that were in his band, you know, they'll say, "Oh, Gene he was like Sam Donahue, you know, he was the lovely person to work for." He treated the musicians great. He loved great musicians, you know. He liked good music. He had good players in his band. He had a lot of great young players.
Yes, he did.
His band didn't get the credit like at a time, you know, when Woody's band, you know, in the middle 40s, Gene had one hell of a good band with young beboppers coming up that could play, you know, that were all on that same kick, you know.
Yeah.
Buddy Wise, Mitch Melnick.
Red Rodney.
Red. Lenny Ambrose, Irby Green.
Jerry Mulligan.
Frank Rossellino, Jerry Mulligan.
Yeah.
Those are all the guy named Dick Taylor.
Yeah. Don Fagerquist.
Ray Triscari. I mean, these guys were all coming up on that same time and could play. Really, you listen to his band at that time.
Yeah.
It's an excellent band.
Well, we're going to hear that band in just a moment as we get there, but we'll keep you waiting for a moment because I want to play a few earlier recordings by Gene. The first one I want to play is one that just shows him as he became famous, and of course that was as a member of the Benny Goodman Band. And I guess that was the first time really that a drummer became such a personality in a band as a sideman. I guess it was really unheard of. If you wanted to be a drummer that was known, you were the leader at that point. It wasn't, but if you were in someone's band, it was unheard of. And eventually, Krupa left Goodman's band because he became as popular or more popular than Benny, and Benny couldn't handle it, and it's easy to understand why. What we're going to hear right now, instead of spending a lot of time with the original recording of Sing, 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 which is a long one, we're going to listen to a version of Caravan. It was never commercially recorded. It was arranged by Jimmy Mundy, and it gave Gene a chance to do kind of a sing, sing, sing thing. You'll hear him do a lot of tom-tom, but then he also swings the band and plays some great snare, drum, and hi-hat work. And then we'll come back and talk. So, Mel Lewis, The History of Jazz Drums at 6:53. And this is WKCR-FM in New York, 89.9 on your FM dial. Let's go to Gene Krupa, and then we'll come back and analyze it with Mel Lewis. Well, that was Benny Goodman's band live on the radio with Caravan.
See, now that was romping. I mean, there was which shows you, what Gene really could swing hard. I did a blindfold test recently where I was talking about that the most swinging record I had heard that day was something Gene was playing on with Jazz at the Philharmonic.
Yeah,
he had a marvelous feel, and Roy always talked about Gene's feel too. He loved it, and that's Roy Ulrich, folks. See, now, Gene was also accused. Now, he was accused a lot of things that he used to drag with his foot. Well, see, now, the point is this. He's not dragging with his foot. If his top is right on there, his foot isn't dragging. If you listen close, it's echo. It's a room sound. They use, the problem, and even I have the same problem today. Anybody that uses calfskin heads on their drums, first of all, what you're getting is when the temperature is just right, when it's sort of on half damp, humid, a certain amount of humidity, the drums sound wonderful.
Right.
and everything is clean as can be, and you get that thud on the bass drum that is unbeatable. You can't get that anywhere. You can't get that on a plastic head. You can't get it. You don't need muffling. You don't need nothing. You just need a touch. Now, Gene had that, same as everybody did in those days, when the temperature was right, when the humidity was correct. The snare drum would be a little loose, the bass drum would be a little loose, the tom-toms were loose, and you got a great sound out of the drums. They were fun to play on. But when the drums were too tight, and you had to keep working on them and pulling them down to get the depth out of the bass drum.
Right.
Don't forget, these were big drums, too. They didn't make little ones in those days. These drums are unmuffled because good drummers didn't muffle their drums. They knew how to play them.
Right.
So the problem is you're playing in these big halls and all that. The drum and then the mic. There's only one mic for everybody,
Yeah.
Well, there's a room ambiance feeling that goes, and there's an echo,
Right.
A room sound, and that's what you're hearing. You're hearing that bass drum coming out late because the heads are hard. You could tell that by how high his tom-toms are and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is tight. When was this recorded? Do you
Summer.
Summer?
In California.
Air conditioning.
Right.
They had it in those days out in California.
Right.
It didn't matter whether they did or they didn't. It was, the sun might have been, if the sun was beating down on the place, it was hot all day long. Those places were hot. And I used to hate it. I played if you played in Denver or in L.A. or in certain places, it was murder, especially after a hot day of the sun. In the winter, you had to contend with the dry heat,
Right.
which we still do. I'm talking about the calfskin head.
I heard about. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, what I'm trying to do is give Gene more credit. A lot of people were listening they weren't listening to what was really happening.
Right.
He couldn't be swinging if the bass drum was behind.
Right. And he was swinging.
Yeah.
Hmm.
He was hitting it right where he's supposed to. It's just that's the way the sound. That's a sound. I mean, it's not exactly accurate.
Yeah. It's exactly, but I'll tell you one thing that's accurate is the time. It's exactly 7 o'clock,
Oh.
and this is WKCR FM in New York, 89.9 on your FM dial. My name is Lauren Schoenberg, and it's my pleasure to be hosting these 3 in a row musician show on last Wednesday night, tonight, and next Wednesday, featuring Mel Lewis and the history of jazz drums, a series that will be continuing throughout the spring here as we deal with the great jazz drummers, and who better to tell us about them and why they were important than a great jazz drummer himself, Mel Lewis, of course, the Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra, going into their 24th year
Yeah.
at the Village Vanguard every Monday night. New recording out on the Music Masters label, and a lot of...
Which, incidentally, was
Oh.
not nominated.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to...
Yeah.
I got your message, but I was out when talking to Dan, and he told me that you had called them, so I was, right there. But, yeah, no, I was very disappointed because they issued your record in time so that it could be nominated. In fact, a lot of people got screwed this year.
Oh.
Well, the only one was, I think, Bill Holman.
Bill Holman was the only record of substance,
Yeah.
or what I would call somebody who deserved to be nominated,
Yeah,
that was nominated. I mean, somebody that has a band,
right.
Because even the Gene Harris band, who did get nominated, that's a pickup band. I mean,
Right.
that was thrown together
That's
for...
not a band that's spent
No,
out
it's not a band that spent
Right.
any time. In fact,
Right.
after they made the record, they were sorry they didn't record it back here when they had a better band in the East,
Yeah.
And they were talking about... I mean, these are things, folks, that we know about, But, I mean, just...
I
these
thought
are
the
just-
HAO record might have been nominated, too.
Well, it should have been, in
Yeah.
a way, because it's also an organized band, I
Yeah.
mean, the point is that this has been one of my arguments with Naris for years, is that... and the people, of course, but it's being run by the West Coast, and this is, again, the West
Politics.
Coast. It's political.
Yeah.
So that's why, I mean, well, anyway, I know that my record, our record, is one of the finest records out this year,
Yeah. It's called-
as was the Benny Carter
Yeah.
AJO record, which I'm proud to have been on.
Yeah.
I'd have been happy if any of those. But I mean, the point is, it's not a matter of winning; it's a matter of being nominated, being recognized
Yeah.
for a good effort by an organization that is trying to keep something happening.
Yeah.
Not one person enjoy their whim.
Yeah.
Like Bob Florence. I mean, who cares? He doesn't. He makes his living writing arrangements for singers. So every once in a while, he indulges in himself and makes a record, and
Right.
it sounds like a Count Basie record or something,
Yeah.
I mean, he's a wonderful writer, and I like Bob, but, come on.
Yeah.
He didn't put any. He didn't pay any dues. You know. I mean, you know, if he really wanted to do what we do, then we should be doing it.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, it certainly wasn't the first time that
And I
a
felt
bad-
sorry. Well, I felt sorry for the guys in my band because they played so well
Yeah.
on this record. This record is so well
Yeah.
recorded and so beautiful, and this marvelous solos.
It's called Soft Lights and Hot Music on the Music Masters
Well, anyway, the
label.
record's still out there, and it's still
Yeah.
new, and it's going to be around for a long time.
Oh, it'll be around forever.
So,
We're talking with Mel Lewis. It's 3 minutes after 7, and again, we're in the midst of the history of jazz drums here. Right now, we're talking about the history of jazz drums in
yeah,
1989.
let's get back to where we belong.
But we're going to
That's
go
good.
from 1989. We're going to go back to 1941. You mentioned Roy Eldridge, and we heard Roy last week in his band with Zooty Singleton on their great record of After You've Gone, with those great
Yeah.
hits on 4 at the end of those breaks. It was so nice the way he let the breaks go. Well, right now we're going to hear Roy Eldridge as a member of the Gene Krupa Band, and this is called Ball of Fire from
Oh, I
a
remember that.
film of the same title.
Right, remember that film.
And just one thing that I'm finding in common with every drummer we've played, from Chick Webb to Zooty Singleton to Krupa to Kaiser Marshall, and it's going to keep going right to the end, is the fact that no matter how many tricks or how many things that these guys can do on their solos and things, by and large, the great majority of the time when the band's playing, they let the band play, whether it's a small
That's-
group or a big band. They let the band do their thing, and they pick their moments very wisely.
It's called taste.
Right, and
Yeah.
and all the drummers we're investigating had taste to the maximum.
That's what made them great.
Right,
So the
and-
great ones had that. The other ones didn't.
And you're just going to hear a very tasteful record. Gene Krupa's Ball of Fire. Again, here's a guy, Gene Krupa, with all the chops in the world, could have been playing over the band and doing a whole bunch of silly stuff. Listen to the way he supports the band, how he picks his spots, and how much him and Roy Eldridge get a nice thing going here. Ball of Fire, 1941, Gene Krupa.
those guys playing lead, and he
Might
had,
be.
yeah, he had some wonderful players played in his band.
Sammy Musiker,
Sammy Musiker,
Sam Donahue,
sure,
Corky Cornelius, and
Yeah.
Graham Young,
right.
and Lyman, all those people.
Lyman Funk.
Lyman Funk.
Yeah.
8 minutes after 7. That was a great record. That was Ball of Fire. Tell us
Sure.
about what he did on there.
Well, that's it. Now, the way he played on there is the way he played in his band. I mean, he always got swinging hard and let the band carry. If you know,
Right.
actually, it was very much like a lot like Benny's band.
Right.
Actually, this band though, it swung even harder.
Yeah, a little
It-
looser.
Yeah, it was a looser feeling band. Well, because everybody felt looser.
Right.
There was nobody glaring at them in front.
Mm.
That makes a difference. We talked about that once.
Yeah.
And Gene just enjoyed himself. He had a good time.
Yeah.
We were talking about the hi-hat, and about different things he did. See, Gene played the hi-hat underneath. His right hand was under. He had his snare drum tilted very deeply
Towards
and-
him,
away from him.
away from him.
Yeah, like Baby Dodds and those guys did. And like
Sonny Greer.
Greer, people like who really does it extreme today is Donald Bailey. He really he still does it like that, so in order to do that, the top of the rim was up so high that you'd have to have the hi hat way up in the air, and they weren't that long. The hi hat wasn't that tall.
Right.
The hi hat was not a high hat in those days. Today they make them so you can stand up. It's
Right.
ridiculous. Everything is so stupidly made today.
It was more like a low hat.
It was like a reasonable height. So he played underneath. He played with his right hand underneath the left hand. So his hi-hats were actually below the top rim of the snare drum.
Oh God. Yeah.
And which accounted maybe also due to the fact that he did a lot of snare drum work. He played on a lot of, like behind Roy there, he'd get on the snare drum.
Yeah.
He'd still do that. Gene was never afraid to play his snare drum even in a modern arrangement of any kind.
Yeah. I enjoyed also the on those shout courses, about 2 or 3 of them towards the end. The varied way that he commented on and,
Yeah.
and did things with the band. It was always he picked a great spot.
Oh, yeah, he'd just leave a little spot and go
one time
chung.
he
He'd
did
just
like,
throw a little offbeat thing,
yeah.
yeah.
And he did quarter note triplets for him on the same one, like ba ba ba.
Yeah, that he used to, that was a little bit of a trademark thing,
And then he
too.
he threw in those bass drum hits
Yeah.
in there, very dramatic. What a beautiful sound.
Yeah, well, his bass drum was tuned
What
great.
a-
I know, I played on that set.
Yeah. What a
Yeah,
beautiful
I-
sound.
Yeah, I knew how he tuned everything.
Tell us about tuning a bass drum. That seems like another lost art.
Well,
mean,
first
what-
of all, a
what's-
bass drum should have nothing in it. A
Right.
bass drum should be tuned. Well, first of all, you should use calf heads on your bass drum. I mean, if you really want to get a real bass drum sound,
Right.
you have to have nothing, and you should have nothing in it. I use it. I remember Cozy Cole did, and you have to have a calfskin head. I use a timpani head, a heavy timpani head on the batter side of the head, and a thin calfskin head on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And you tune that head. The outside head is a little tighter than the batter side. The batter side should be tuned lower. I try to get it as low as I can get it,
Yeah.
without any wrinkles.
Right.
That's usually the way I tune them. And then the front head, I do the same thing, except once I've got it, then I turn it up just a little bit so there's some pitch.
Mm-hmm.
Then I take a piece of paper napkin and put it over on the side with a little piece of Scotch tape or some masking tape, and just to take the little of the overtone out over on the side
Mm-hmm.
of the outside of the drum, nothing inside,
Right.
and that's it. Then you use the biggest beater you can find. You got to have a big beater and hit that thing right smack in the center of the drum.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it should hit.
Yeah.
That's why it's a 20-inch bass drum. It's very easy to hit right in the center. It's perfect for the average pedal.
Mm-hmm.
A 22 you can do it, but you got to have the beater ball out just about as far as it'll go,
Mm-hmm.
which gives you a little top heaviness there. So I prefer a 20-inch bass drum. I use a 16 by 20 with the big band.
Mm-hmm.
I find out that gives me the same airspace. That gives me the same amount of airspace that a 22-inch drum would have. A 14 by 22. I have a 16 by 20.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get that more or less that cannon effect.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can make any good bass drum sound good just tuning it that way. 18, 20, 22. But when you get it, because when you get into great big bass drums, you don't need great big bass drums. But in those days, that's all they had.
Davy Tuff played a huge one. I've seen
Yeah,
pictures.
well, that was a 28. That was
Yeah.
that's what Gene and Davy and all the guys. That's what they had when I first started. That's what I had.
Yeah.
You had no choice, and they weren't heavy. The drums were not heavy because they were thin shells. They were made for
Right.
tone.
Right.
They were like concert bass drums.
Yeah.
They were really, and the whole idea was the more you. Davy noted for he used to tear newspaper up in strips and throw that inside
Mm.
like confetti type of stuff. He threw that inside the bass drum. Then he was famous for carrying around a water can with him,
Right.
so he could keep it wet.
Right.
To get that soggy feeling
Yeah.
which you would need whenever you played in areas where you needed it.
Yeah.
Keep some dampness in there.
On records like that, and when Gene played with his band, and we're just about to go to one of the most famous later records, a lot of modern drummers got turned on to Gene, and that was Disc Jockey Jump, which was
Yeah.
a big hit. What level did he play the bass drum at, volume-wise? Would you say medium level? I mean, was he always playing four to the bar?
Yeah, he played four to
except-
the bar,
Except when he did those.
except when he'd stop to play a fill or
punctuation,
something,
yeah.
which is what we all do. I mean, I play fancier tricks with the bass drum today than they did in those days. I mean,
Right.
I do it and other people do it. A lot of drummers don't play their bass drum at all today, and those are the ones who don't swing too well.
Yeah.
You got to play your bass drum. I mean, that's where it all comes from. I remember when Tony Williams wouldn't play his. He plays it now. He's a little heavy too, but he plays it and he swings much harder because of it. And I think it's important. I know he's glad he does it.
Yeah.
But in the beginning he couldn't do it. And I'm not talking out of turn. He admits that.
Yeah, sure.
But he
Well,
plays
it's
it
an
now.
art.
Yeah.
Like when we heard that record last week of the Baby Dodds drum solos, and you mentioned about how he kept that beautiful level going for
Yeah.
the bar and the bass drum, about how a lot of drummers can do a lot of fancy stuff, but couldn't play 32 measures four to the bar with an even tone.
Yeah. Well, most of your rock
Yeah.
drummers can't play 4 beats in one bar. And yet they can play all that fancy stuff,
Yeah.
and they practice that all day long, but they cannot play 4 even beats, which is what swing is all about,
Yeah. Well, right now we're going to carry on and hear our last Gene Krupa recording. This is the band Mel was referring to. It's kind of a bebop band that Mel had. And this is, I guess, one of the first big hitter
Gene had.
Mel, Gene Krupa had. And this is one of the first big hit, I guess, for Jerry Mulligan. This is
Yep.
Disc Jockey Jump, and Mulligan must have been a teenager or something like that at
He
that
was
point.
only around 19 whenever he wrote this.
Wrote a masterpiece. Buddy Wise on the tenor, Charlie Kennedy on the alto, and not sure who the trumpet is.
That's Fagerquist.
Don Fagerquist.
Oh, it might be Red.
Yeah.
I'll tell you afterwards.
Okay. Anyway, we get to hear Krupa interpreting kind of an early bebop arrangement and sounding just so tasteful and so beautiful on it.
see, now, that was that was one of the first early bebop records, a big band. You know, it came out. That was
Early
around
46?
early 40s, middle 40s. That was Red Rodney, by the way.
Right.
I'm positive, and I think it was Leon Cox on trombone. If I recall the members of the band at that time. Buddy Wise was a wonderful young tenor player at that time. We lost him to junk, as there's no hiding that. That's what happened to him.
Charlie
Years
Kennedy.
later, actually, Charlie Kennedy is who I worked with on the coast. Was a member that he's on all those Terry Gibbs Dream
Yes.
Band stuff.
Yeah.
But Charlie he got fed up with that scene out there, and he just quit playing again for a second time. So he's working
Where
in
is he?
a
Out in
tire factory or something. like that.
California?
Yeah. And it was a shame because he was also one of the great young alto players of the 40s, you know, out of the Parker tradition.
Yeah.
And yeah, he played tenor too, but on the band he played alto. He played some tenor. He played tenor on a Bill Holman record.
I know I've seen his name on tenor.
Yeah,
I
he
was
played
surprised.
tenor but alto was his thing. He played
Yeah.
alto. I mean, he was sort of a nice cat too, Charlie. And anyway, that band, yeah. Now there's where you hear the taste that Gene had. You know, here was a guy that was caught in the middle of a situation. You know, I mean, he's Gene Krupa. He's been around for years now. He's got a style. He came out of the swing era. He's not a bebopper, but he wants to have a bebop band. He wants a modern band. He wants to play modern, but how do you make that transition? I mean, how could he have done it? He
Yeah.
couldn't, really, you know. So the only one thing he could do is what he did. Play with as much taste as possible, you know. And I used to go to... Those were the days when I was on the scene pretty strong, and I spent a lot of time with the band, you know, hanging out with him and all that, and I was traveling here and there, and because 46 is when I first went on the road, you know, and I used to run into him all the time, and I was always knocked out with the band. I never felt that anything was ever lacking, and I always thought that, and that's when he was starting to that's when he started using a ride cymbal. I mean, really using it. You know, that's when Gene finally went to putting up a big cymbal on his bass drum and all that. That was the only change he made.
The showmanship thing of Gene Krupa that turned a lot of people on and turned some other people off.
Well,
But you want to? It's my feeling. I knew the man fleetingly, only for a year or so, and didn't know him well at all. You knew him very well for a long period of time. It seemed to me that showmanship was a very natural thing for him.
it was totally natural.
It wasn't a
for
put
him.
on or like
No,
a show
no.
thing.
I know it wasn't because he was using it when I first met him, when I was a little boy, you know, and it seemed like a natural thing to him,
Yeah.
you know. And if you look back, it wasn't that much.
No, just some funny faces.
He made some faces, you know, and he used to chew gum, you know,
Right.
and the
Mutter
hair,
things.
yeah, and the hair flying in the face and all that. I mean, that's because that was it. The hair was there, you know, and he was sweating, you know,
Right.
and we all did. Everybody sweat. I mean, if you want to be bored watching somebody like me, fine, you know. I made things look too easy. Dave Tuff made it look too easy, you know. I mean, Gene, he didn't make it look hard. He
Right.
that was just the way he did it, you know.
Yeah.
Because I used to, I'd be sitting up there. Sometimes I'd be standing on the side of the bandstand, watching him work, and he'd be talking to the guys in the band while he's playing along. You know, he's smiling and remembering something funny. He'd look over at me and he'd nod to me to look out at the audience because there was something funny going on out in the audience,
Right.
or he'd nod to me to dig so and so's going to play, you know, the solo so and so's going to listen to this new guy I got and so
Mhm.
on. He was like that, you know.
Mm.
And you know, and once in a while, and there were certain figures where the band would play stops. He used to love breaks,
Right.
like ba da da ba, you know, nothing in between.
Right.
Now that's hard. You got to be careful in there, you know. No fill, nothing, and the band would have to hit, and that's when he would do something dramatic with his arms or something, you know.
Oh yeah.
He'd put them up in the air or something like that.
Right.
But he wouldn't play anything,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And it would be just silence.
Yeah.
And then when the band would hit, of course, he'd come down with his
Right.
hands onto the
Right.
cymbals or something. and that would emphasize. So in a way, it was a fill,
Yeah.
a visual fill, you
Yeah.
know, things like that. So, and I think that all helped. I think it just helped, you know. But I mean, but he was not a show off,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, there's a big difference there.
Yeah.
I remember seeing there's a film of him doing something where he does a break like that with the just this image I have in my mind of him going with the hands up in the air
Yeah.
and hitting the bass drums or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like not with the hands. Like you
Yeah.
see the hands go up and nothing's happening.
Yeah, you know, I mean, different guys would do the, you know.
Why
and
not? Right. I mean, if
listen,
that's
you
your
know,
if it comes naturally to you.
Sonny Greer would look to the left while he hit something to the right. I mean, you know, it's just
Right.
these are things guys would do. You know,
Yeah.
just to look sharp. You know.
Well, it's one of the only story I can tell about playing with Sonny Greer was playing Body and Soul one night, and I had my eyes closed and hadn't been playing very long at the time, and all of a sudden the audience is laughing. My eyes are closed, playing a ballad. No idea what's going on. I thought my fly was open or a rabbit was on my shoulder. I had no idea what was going on. So I turned around, I look, and Sonny Greer was playing drums. He was doing this thing where he used to open up his coat, like
Yeah.
he'd open up the coat from the left and from the right, and then he'd like swing the brush around on his
Yeah.
hands and all that kind of showmanship stuff. It was amazing that he could do all that stuff and never interfere with the music.
That's it. you
And
know.
of course, we're really going to get into that on the next show. Talk about a cliffhanger when we talk about Big Sid Catlett.
Yeah.
Now, there's the perfect example
Sid used to
of,
have all these routines he did.
but yet you listen
Lighting
to
a
like
cigarette
Steakface,
Yeah.
and I'm going to save that. That's
Yeah,
just
let's-
too exciting.
All right.
7:25, Lauren Schoenberg here with Mel Lewis, and it's the history of jazz drums. And you're listening to WKCR FM in New York, 89.9 on your FM dial. If I was Bob Hope, I'd say this is Lauren. I have a cold Schoenberg. I sound a little stuffed up here, but we're coming to you in stereo, and we're going to go from Gene Krupa to a drummer who actually predates him in the chronology, both in the birth date and also in jazz drumming, and that's the great Sonny Greer.
Right.
And right now we're going to listen to a Sonny Greer recording, Black Beauty. This is 1928. It's a Victor recording, and it's important because, and we'll talk more about this later, the fact that it's one of the very first recordings where the piano, bass, and drums function as a rhythm section. It's not the way that you're used to hearing it, but if you can listen to it freshly and without any prejudices of the surface noise of the 78 or the fact that it's a 60-year-old record, almost a 61-year-old recording. The fact that actually I think it has a lot in common with some of the more modern things that have been going on in music because they're all doing their own thing musically. It's not about just keeping 4/4 time. But anyway, enough talk. Let's listen to Black Beauty. We'll focus in on Sonny Greer on the drums, and I think the most appropriate summation of Sonny Greer was the one that Duke Ellington made when he said that for every ping the band made, Sonny made the appropriate pong.
That's right.
Wrong record queued up. Want to vamp for a minute while I get the right one?
Well, okay. What are we going to do now?
Very good joke.
I don't know any good jokes.
The Sonny Greer record.
Oh, okay.
I had the wrong one up there.
Oh, what was that?
But the wrong one I had up was for time reasons a drummer who we weren't going to get to play, but one who I want to mention was that Joe Jones was very fond of, Walter Johnson.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And he was known as Stickin'. I've heard two things. He was known as Stickin' Brush because he played with a
Stick in a
a
brush.
stick and a brush. And Harold Austin, a drummer friend of mine.
I remember. Yeah, I knew Harold Austin.
Yeah,
too.
well, he's still going strong. And he was
Harold's-
talking to me the other day. He was with Jonah Jones.
Right, for years.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he told me that one of Walter Johnson's tricks was he'd play a tune like the one we have right there, the Limehouse Blues with Fletcher Henderson's band, fast tempo, never sweat. And at the end of the tune, he'd put down the drumsticks and pick up a little handkerchief and kind of
Yeah,
mop his brow. Very, very cool, you know.
yeah,
So we should just pay tribute just by name to Walter Johnson. a
yeah.
great
At least,
drummer.
at least.
Did you see him or no? He was,
No, I don't know if I saw him or not. I don't think so. Probably.
but
Probably
you heard
not.
of him.
Oh,
and heard of his
sure.
reputation.
Of course.
Yeah, one of the very early, light, nice drummers. Okay, now Sonny Greer and Black Beauty. Black Beauty, the original band recording. I think one of Duke's early piano solos was on Black Beauty. This was the full band version from 1928. Mel, any comments?
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about now. I could understand in the middle section there, during the rhythm section, the concept of creation, of instead of just playing straight ahead, they all contributed a little solo on solo.
Yeah.
And as you and I were talking while it was playing, the idea you brought up about the free concept of playing, which is supposedly so fresh and new today,
Right.
Well, I don't think anything is fresh and new today, Anyway, it's just what it is the concept, the way they played in those days. I mean, it sounds hokey to us today, but it wasn't hokey then.
No.
It was very modern then.
Yeah.
So what's modern today, will sound hokey 60 years from now too,
Right.
So let's looking at it from that angle.